Hello there folks, I'm Dan Brown from a sort of interesting life.com. You're joining me on board good old narrowboat Tilly, and today we're going to talk in response to a few requests I've had off people about how I sit down and write my books. Now, if this is the first of my videos that you're watching, then this is basically my little boat, and over the last few years I've published 5 short Kindle books about my time on board Tilly. The latest of which I've luckily got the actual printed out final manuscript here, which we'll have a look at in just a second. But basically, I just wanted to share a few thoughts on my actual writing style and, well, my actual system of writing these short books. As there's been a few people ask me, and I've done videos talking about the pros and cons of Kindle publishing in the past, but this one I just want to be a nice relaxed general chat about what I actually do when I'm sat down trying to write these books. So, to put it in context again, like I say, these are only short books that I write, between sort of 20 and 40,000 words, in that general ballpark, so you can sit down and read them quite quickly in a few hours, in one sitting in many cases. And so, without further ado, let's dive straight in. The first thing is obviously having the ideas and having the theme, or basically coming up with what's the book that you actually want to write. And because mine have been based on my actual life, I obviously have quite a good reference to that, with a lot of random stories and things and experiences from my time afloat. So that helps hugely in my case. And also, the thing that really is a benefit to me when I'm sat down trying to write these books too, is the fact that I love writing. And I've said before in videos that you can go back and look in my old school books and find random little stories that I was writing when I was in school that were totally unrelated to whatever class I was actually in, and nothing to do with school, just things I was writing for the sake of writing. Then through college I wrote about a 65,000 word book, and again, we won't get into that, but again, it's just all from even like my teenage years to modern day. There's loads of examples of me writing these short stories and longer books and poems and things like that, till ultimately I've sat down and started writing these little books about living on a boat and the things that happen on the canal and all that sort of general cheery stuff. So that's my sort of ace in the hole personally. I think that I've always loved writing, so I can sit down and continue to do something that I love. Now, the important thing, obviously, in sitting down and writing your books is having that idea of what do you want to write about, and what's the general story, what's the theme, what's the narrative, whatever you want to call it. And I find that I will very often just have random ideas and think, oh, I could put that in a book, oh, I could put that in the book I'm working on, or oh, this might be an idea for the future. So I try and write down and note down all these ideas as and when they happen. Sometimes it can be totally random moments, whether I'm at work, whether I'm on the boat, whether I'm cycling somewhere, and I'm just like, right, better remember that for the future and work on that sometime. So then I will often find myself sat down at the desk, just writing a few random things, whether those are little bits that will end up being further on in a book that I write at some point, whether they're the beginning of random books that I want to test out, whether I think it'll work if I actually sit down and start writing the theme or the introduction to, I don't know, insert book X, Y or Z here. And ultimately, that's how I start to find myself sometimes getting a little bit flustered, as I can sit down, start writing a few different ideas and start fleshing out a few different points for books that I haven't started writing yet, and end up with a few thousand words here, a few thousand words there, a few thousand words in another place, and not really have a focused book that I'm working on. So when I basically am doing that, I'm trying to figure out which one will be the next proper book that I come to and focus on and make into the next little book for the Kindle. So ultimately, once I come up with, this is the one that I want to write, or, oh, right, I wasn't expecting it, but I've just come up with something I can write in this book, so I think I'm going to write that properly through and try and focus on just this one to get to the point that I can write about what I really want to write about. If that makes any sense at all. I hope that it does. It gives some sort of insight into my process of basically working on a few different ideas until one of them catches me and I'm like, right, this is the one, this is what we're focusing on now. So then, when I get into that particular book, and like I say, recently it's been mainly short boat life books that I've been doing. So on top of my love of writing and boating and stuff, which is the perfect combination, also I am very lucky to be very much into writing diaries and journals and that sort of stuff. So not only have I got my memories and experience, but I've got loads of actual written diary entries. I've got loads of photos and stuff that I can look back on and put my memories into order and get actual facts of like, oh, I've got a photo from this day when this happened, so I know that was definitely like, I don't know, July the whatever day. And so that helps a huge amount when writing these little sort of stories of my years afloat and things like that. And really, the core of what I'm about to say is trial and error. Now, when I'm writing these books, I will sometimes start at the absolute beginning. Sometimes I'll write little different sections that will come later on and then write to basically link those bits up. And other times I will just sit down and try and write straight from beginning to end, or I'll write the middle section first because that's the part that's freshest in my mind. And there's all sorts of different ways I go about it, really, and it's all about what suits you and what seems the best thing at the moment, I suppose. Although what seems the best thing at the moment is definitely not always the best thing overall. And by that I can illustrate with the amounts of just the thousands and thousands of words that I will write very often, only to think, well, I don't really like that. That doesn't seem very good at all. And then I'll delete that, discard that, and start again. And this is where it can take me so long to write even like a book that's about 30,000 words long or so. Because on top of that 30-odd thousand words, there will be X amount of thousands that were written and have been wiped off the face of the earth, never to be seen again. And other times, even more sort of frustratingly, I'll decide that I don't like what I've written, get rid of that, write another 1,000 words or so on whatever I was writing about, and then think, actually, you know what, it was much better before, it made far more sense, and so then I rewrite it all again in that style that it was originally written in. So again, it's all about being your own critique, being your biggest critic, and trying to read things from another person's perspective as well. That's absolute key, because what I find is very often I write knowing exactly what I'm talking about, and then when I read it back later, it's like, hang on, I haven't really explained that to anybody who's not familiar with what I do or where I am and that sort of stuff. So I have to add in some description about where I am and description that basically makes the rest of it make sense. And this is where my absolute the key to how my recent books have been so much better than they were previously is having my nan go through these printed documents and edit it, edit. Now, obviously, I'm going to say I can't thank my nan enough. Thank you there. I know you'll probably be tuning into this. But basically, she knows her stuff, to say the least. And when it comes to English and all that sort of stuff, then we've definitely got a big thumbs up. So thank you, Nan. And that's how these books, like, if I look back at some of my older books that I used to write, then they are just, the books and the core are what I would write about now. But the editing, before my nan got on board with the boat books, I should really use that as a great pun there, the editing and the general sort of use of punctuation and stuff was terrible. Whereas now, my nan's been through all these books and just basically corrected me on probably thousands of occasions over the course of the last couple of years. And for example, if we just have a look at, I don't know if any of this will show up, but there's all of these little things added in here, just basically going through saying, like, this doesn't make sense to me reading it as a fresh pair of eyes. This doesn't quite read correctly. This is where you need commas. This is where you need a full stop in a new sentence. And basically, proper editing and proper use of punctuation being thrown in so that people who aren't me reading these, who don't know exactly what I want to talk about and exactly what I'm trying to explain, can actually understand it because it's written and punctuated in a way that the sentences flow. Whereas when I read it back, because I know exactly where the sentences are going and what the sentences are trying to convey, obviously I find it a lot more difficult to sit down and place all the commas correctly and so on, knowing what I want to say. Whereas my nan sits down, knows what I want to say because she's read so much of my work in the previous years, but basically is looking at it from the point of view of somebody who may have never read or may never have known anything about me up until this point. So she can look at with that perspective a lot better than I can and go, well, I don't know what you're trying to say there, don't know what you're trying to say there. So do you mean that the hill was big, or you're on the hill, something. Again, these are just random examples I'm trying to pluck out of my head here, but it's all about, like I say, just having somebody sit down, read your stuff and say, right, this doesn't make sense to me, this doesn't make sense to me, this doesn't make any sense to anyone. And then when I sit down and read that, it's all about me looking at it and going, right, I don't know everything in the world. I'm not the greatest writer or editor in the world, and I can see exactly what all of these points are. And it's about having the humility as well to go, well, you know what? I'm not perfect, and therefore I'm going to take other people's criticism and advice, and therefore at the end of the day, these books that I've released have been infinitely better than had I have done what I used to do, which was basically be too shy to actually let any of my family read them or see them, and instead just publish them straight out without anybody, well, with some people going through, but without the proper old school punctuation and English education of, right, this is how things are meant to be written, this is how things are written to make sense, and this is all about my input into what I think will make this better. So I hope that that's proved slightly interesting or useful, but that's the general process that I go through. And I'm going to try and wrap this video up very quickly now as I see how long it's gone on for. So to wrap things up, I will say all the usual things. If you want to check out my books and that, then please do find the links in the description below. Like I say, nice quick reads that hopefully you'll be able to sit down and go through over the weekends or in these cold evenings that we've got at the moment. Until the next time as well, feel free to check out my other videos about boat life and all the rest of it, or even add me on Facebook and Twitter for loads of boaty pictures and canal scenery. But until the next time, have an absolutely fantastic day, keep it pen worthy, keep it boat worthy, and of course, farewell!